Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to the Insider Insight Show. I am honored to have back with me someone who is, I believe, one of the best investigative journalists on our planet, Corey Lynn. She has a website and a YouTube channel, Corey Digs, like digging for the truth. This was an interview that we recorded the afternoon prior to Jeffrey Epstein's death. And in particular, I wanted to have Corey come forward because she has some information as it relates to the Epstein network. And this is what's going to come out in the ensuing months. I wanted to get you ahead of the curve. And the information that Corey presents, potentially a very small portion of it, might eventually be presented in the bought-off lamestream fake media. But the networks that Corey has uncovered are extremely important moving forward, especially since the death of Jeffrey Epstein. So if you can, write a couple little notes down, some of the key players she presents here, because she goes into what's going on in New Mexico and in particular in St. Thomas. I had some leads based on the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, and the fact that the ownership initially was in Epstein's name and then in 2013 switched to a corporate name. And when you trace the corporate name, we could trace it to St. Thomas. Corey independently did the same thing, but then she went even deeper looking at this issue as far as some of the relationships in the Caribbean. This is really, really important going forward. Again, now let's turn to the interview with Corey. I thank you for being a subscriber, and I thank you for joining us today. Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to our Insider Insight Show. I am honored to have back with us the best investigative, independent, let's underline independent journalist I'm aware of on the planet. She is more than thorough. She gets tremendous blowback for the facts, the data, the information that she digs out on folks. Her name is Corey Lynn. She goes by Corey Digs as well. Her website, and I encourage you to go there. It's fantastic. Corey's Digs, Coreys Digs, Digs.com. Corey'sDigs.com. Now, a little background. Corey's Digs was created by investigative journalist Corey Lynn for the purpose of digging for truth in a world where nothing is as it seems, then connecting the dots and presenting her findings directly to you. Corey focuses on larger webs and nests in areas that are seldom covered by what I call the bought-off lamestream fake media. She exposes operations, oftentimes with detailed timelines, maps, and documentation to provide the full scope of what may be transpiring and what you're not being told. Here's a little quote from Corey that I think says it all. Quote, "I encourage everyone to do their own digging, use discretion, and question everything. Over time, you begin to spot the enemy, recognize the symbolism, see their strategies in play, and ultimately be able to quickly assess the liars from the truthers, the illusions from reality. We have been living in an illusion far too long. It is time to become aware and make others aware before it's too late. It's time to do some digging." It's my honor to bring to you and back to you fan favorite, Corey Lynn. Corey, welcome back to DaveJanda.com and the Insider Insight Show.
Thanks, Dave. That was quite an intro.
Well, you are quite,
and
I'm very sincere about this. You are quite the person. You are quite the investigator, and you have the work that you have done has been beyond superb. So, Corey, let's talk about good old Jeffrey Epstein and the network and racket around him. You know, Corey, right outside this window here, in the People's Republic of Ann Arbor, I'm constantly told that I'm a conspiracy theorist on many fronts, including Epstein. Right. That Epstein is a bad guy, but he's a one-off. There's no network behind him. There's no intelligence agencies behind. There's nothing. This is a bad guy who did some bad things, and I'm making too much of it. And this conspiracy theory, Dave, about his network. Corey, you have done exceptional work. You have put huge amounts of time and effort into your investigative work on Epstein. Hit it, Corey. Your take on how right those people are out there and how wrong I am, or maybe even vice versa.
Well, they would be completely incorrect. There are a lot of networks, and there are people that have been doing some fantastic investigating on this and putting reports out on some of his connections and the money trail. And I recently published an article on Zorro Ranch in New Mexico because I wasn't seeing that covered so much. So I showed the web that's going on over there. And I'm now working on which by the time this airs, this will be out. So I'm about 50% done with writing this report on a network I am breaking down in St. Thomas. And it was getting to be, it had so many arms that I had to diagram this out, which I sent to you. I sent you an updated diagram, by the way.
I got it. Yeah, thanks. No, it's outstanding.
Thank you.
Your diagrams, our flow diagram, I mean, they're fantastic, right? A picture's worth 1,000 words. In your case, it's worth about 10,000 words.
So and just real briefly on Zorro before we move into the St. Thomas network, in there, the one thing I wanted to point out was the fact that the Kings, he purchased the island, stuck on the island. He purchased the Zorro Ranch from Bruce King, former governor.
And this is in New Mexico.
This is in New Mexico.
Right, so everybody talks about Pedophile Island in the Caribbean, Little St. James Island. He owns Big St. James Island. They talk about this mansion on 71st Street in New York City. And this is always an indication, Corey. You're one of the very few people that have spoken about the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico. Hit it.
Yeah, so I wanted to see, they had mentioned that, the Kings still own some land surrounding the ranch. And I thought, well, why would they sell off this huge family property? So I went in and I did a diagram on that. I did the parcels and I indicated all of the parcel owners, and the Kings have it completely surrounded on all sides.
Yeah,
it
is surrounded. I mean, that dude Epstein is insulated by the Kings.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we have Gary King, who was the former AG. And then we have his wife, Yolanda, and that's the one I had my sights on because she is really connected in through in defense, in space technologies, in weapons, ballistic missiles. I mean, she was in the Air Force for 30 years. She is very, very well connected. And I found that interesting because I was also working on a network I had found in St. Thomas that also has similar connections very high up in military and defense. And I thought, why do I keep finding these people so closely in connection with Epstein? And so I encourage people to go in and read the Zorro Ranch one and see the various connections there before going in and reading this one on St. Thomas. Okay, so the first thing I want to bring up, because I think there's been some confusion on this. 6100 Red Hook Quarter, B3, the address where several of Jeffrey Epstein's companies are going to. People were confused because they couldn't find it, and they said it doesn't exist. It does exist. What it is American Yacht Harbor. The marina there has boat docks and slips. He is 50% owner with Andrew Farkas of the American Yacht Harbor. So that marina there is Dock B, Slip 3. So that is the address that's being used for his businesses. And this is what got me set on this network in the first place, which is funny. I was looking into a CPA that was at that address. Now, I hadn't even gone through his Black Book yet, which I have on my resources if anyone's looking for that. I have the flight logs, the indictment, all of it in my resources on my site. So I hadn't even really looked through that yet. And I wanted to know why her address was going there. I thought, is this a CPA? So I started digging into it, and I ended up discovering this huge network. I've literally spent over 100 hours breaking this down. And it actually resulted back to 2010, 2012 investigations that were going on under Eric Holder's watch. So a few of these players are tied into that, which, made it even more interesting, of course. So Needless to say, whether or not she's his CPA, I cannot determine, but she definitely works for him. So her name, Jean Brennan Wybrocht. And I know the first thing people are going to say is, oh, is she related to Brennan? I did not find that connection. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I did not personally find that.
Okay.
So she is on, there's a company I don't believe I've seen reported. It's called VT&T LLC, kind of like AT&T.
Right.
She is on the documentation for that. She is also in Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book, because I went in and I looked under his little section called Island with all of his contacts. And there's Jean. Now, the VT&T had filed for a license for a microwave. Let me just scroll down in my page here, because this part I don't want to screw this up. So I'll have links in here so everyone can go in and get these, and I've archived all of this. So this is his private comms. So this is a tower that is set up in Staley in St. Thomas, and it is connecting, it's a point-to-point contact to Little St. James. And so I have the coordinates on here. The license is, the contact person for this, of course, is Jean Brennan. Mm-hmm. And what's kind of funny is on this, I guess you'd call it kind of the main application for the license, which was granted in October 2014 and is good through 2024, by the way. On here, there's a few questions where they had to answer yes or no. And it says, has the applicant or any party to this applicant or any party directly or indirectly controlling the applicant ever been convicted of a felony by any state or federal court? And of course, they had to put yes.
Yeah. And what did they put after they put yes? Did they give any details?
No, there's no information there. But so this is the exact coordinates, and it's an 18.7 gigahertz microwave radio transmission. And it's on a tower under there's probably about 20 other companies, some of them big names, that are also on that tower. So they actually had to have to run a survey and test it and make sure that that it's not interfering with the other, I guess you'd call them dishes, or I don't know the technical term. So I have all that documentation on here, the FCC license for this. And when I pulled the coordinates on Little St. James, what's curious is it comes up right next to the tennis courts, which is not far from the sundial, the famous sundial there. And there's no tower or anything visible showing. So I don't know if they can get approved for it. And then, afterwards, they have it all set up, say they have the tower, and then they decide, oh, let's move this over 50 feet or 100 feet. It's still gonna function right going over to the island. So I don't know. That one's kind of a mystery, but I thought that was interesting because that's private comms they had rolling there. And the company that had provided that equipment, called Dragon Wave Inc., interestingly, 2 years later saw this huge spike in the stock market and went from, don't quote me on this, I'd have to look it up again. I want to say it was like 50 cents up to $4 or something one day.
Oh,
and then 2
one
years
day.
later,
Oh, nice.
Boom. 2 years later, they're gone.
Oh, of course. Right.
So that was an interesting one. The bigger one, I'm going to hit on the big ones, and people will have to come in and see all the specifics and the details of this. But
and again, at Corey's, Coreys, Diggs, Digs.com.
Yes.
Go ahead, Corey. I just want to throw that in.
Okay. So now Jean is on the board of Antilles School in St. Thomas. This is a private preparatory school that runs from toddler up through high school. Now, here's the thing, though. I know that would be your first thought until I start digging further and I start running all these board members. Okay, so we have all these women that are on the board in various positions for several years. We have the former First Lady, governor, Cecil And I don't, how do I pronounce this? Is it Dejong?
I think it is Dejan. Yeah.
Dejong? Okay.
Yeah.
So she's been on the board numerous times. She also was the office manager of Jeffrey Epstein's Southern Trust Company, which he had founded in 2012. So she's on those documents as well, which that company donated to Antilles School. Then we have Erica Kellerhouse, which is from Kellerhouse Ferguson Croblin law firm that holds his documents and is the secretary, or was secretary, to Gratitude for America Ltd. Foundation, which is Jeffrey Epstein's, and she was the secretary in 2015. She is also on the board of Antilles School. We have Claire Starkey, owner of FinTrack, which is a whole other channel I'm going to be going down, that was founded in 1990 with connections to the Clinton Global Initiative. She is on the board. And we have Pamela Burkowski, who is a Clinton appointee and former Governor Dejong's chief of staff. This woman's background in military and Navy and defense goes way up. So we got the Clinton connection in there as well. Mm-hmm. She's on the board. We have the Community Foundation of the Virgin Islands tied in with the Clinton Global Initiative. Pamela has been on the board of that, as well as a couple others. We've got this woman, Marjorie Rowles Roberts, who's a tax attorney. She's a doozy. She's one of those that would do anything just to stand in the shadow of power. And I say that because I spent a lot of time scouring her Facebook. Right. She's got pictures with all the presidents and governors. And look who I saw on the beach today, Bill Richardson, who was in my Zorro Ranch report. And Bill and I have gotten to know each other really well over the last few years. And I'm like, wow, just keep bragging. This is good stuff.
Right, yeah, Bill Richardson, the former governor of New Mexico. Good friend of the King family out there, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So not only is she also on the board, she was a bundler for Barack Obama's campaign. And so she came under scrutiny back in 2012 when these big investigations into financial crime ring that went way up through the legislators, Governor DeJong. She was handling the taxes and the applications for big Ponzi schemers and criminals on trying to get them the Virgin Islands tax breaks. Now, Pamela Burkowski also had worked for him. So we've got the governor of the Virgin Islands. We've got Bill Clinton. We've got Antilles School, the Community Foundation. She's connected in with all of that. Mm-hmm. And she, when that whole thing was breaking, she was trying to get file for tax breaks under another name that her husband owned a company of. And she was ousted and ended up abruptly resigning. And her background's very extensive in this. Now, her husband, Adam Shapiro, is the one I was speaking with you about before we started this. I should just
this guy has more fingers and more pies than you could ever shake a stick at, and pies all over the world. Go ahead, educate our listeners on this guy, because this guy's background is so off the charts.
Yeah, so this guy, well, I don't know if it's as off the charts as Pamela's, though. Hers is pretty good, too.
Hers is pretty good, too.
We're talking, she had a distinguished career at the Pentagon and appointed by President Bill Clinton to serve as Assistant Chief of Staff to Secretary of Defense William S. Cohen at the time. And she was with the DOD and Navy and all kinds. So,
and Cohen, by the way, Corey, has quite the background. This was brought forward by NYP detective, ran the detective division for NYPD for decades, Jim Boots Rothstein, who was just on my show. Cohen has quite the background in his activities related to the younger people, might I say.
Interesting. I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
and Jimmy was the one who confronted him on that.
Oh boy.
That's not hearsay. That's Jim confronting him on that.
Right. So Adam Shapiro, 14 years of college under his belt with an AB in biochemistry from Cornell, an MD from George Washington University, 4 years at Albany Medical College for the word I can't pronounce.
Otolaryngology, that's ear, nose, and throat.
There
surgery.
we go. Mm-hmm. Surgery. Okay.
Ear, nose, and throat surgery.
Mm-hmm. 4 years at the University of Pittsburgh for facial plastic surgery. Just a little humor. He went to high school in Great Neck, New York. I thought that was funny. So this guy has numerous medical facilities, and like you're saying, it would be really hard to keep up with all this.
Well, not just facilities, Corey. What you said in like licenses. Places right but not just places like 5 miles apart.
Right.
This guy we're talking licenses all over the map.
Yeah. So he was the founder and president of Aerospace Medical Sleep Consultants since in 2015, which is in Miami, Florida, and St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. Now, this place, just so everyone knows, which his wife is Pamela Bukowski, is the COO of. So, and it's registered to their home, their mansion in Coral Gables, Florida. Now, they supposedly deal with, sleep disorders and fatigue for people in aviation and the space industry. But if you go into their site, they list a myriad of other health-related issues. And they serve the Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, military, in North America, South America, Caribbean, Europe, Asia, Africa. So to me, that's a really good cover. Based on everything else I've researched in here, that's a really good cover. Now, in addition to that, he's, like I said, a head and neck plastic surgeon. He founded the Virgin Islands Ear, Nose, and Throat offices in St. Thomas and St. Croix. He founded the Virgin Islands Facial Plastic Surgery, the Virgin Islands Allergy Center, and the Hearing and Balance Center, and the St. Thomas Sleep Center. So that's in addition to the other. Now,
and by the way, Corey, when you have somebody doing ear, nose, and throat, sleep, and allergy,
and facial plastic surgery,
I'm sorry, Corey, it's just not possible.
Yeah,
it's just not possible. And then the question is, clinically, what hospital is he on staff at?
You know what? I have to go back and I was actually working on his background last night. So I'm like I said, I've got this 50% written, but I'm trying to think of the name of it. There is a hospital out there that he is affiliated with. It'll be in my report once I finish writing it. But then we have, and I'd have to check to see if these are still up to date, but at points in time, he has been licensed as a medical doctor and surgeon in the Virgin Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands, Florida, New York, D.C., California, and Arkansas. So,
and these are states. Does he have operations in? I mean,
not
Virgin Islands, Florida. He does, but what about?
Not that I've traced thus far, but it's entirely possible because one of the things you got to remember is these people all do things under the guise of another company.
Right.
And so unless you can, and then they'll have like an agent listed, so they don't even have their name anywhere on there. So it becomes, very tedious digging for that. He's also a licensed pilot. And back in 2010, flew to Haiti with a few other doctors to assist after the earthquake.
Well, that's special.
From 1995 to present, he's an FAA designated senior aviation medical examiner. And he also, where did I put that? I don't want to quote it wrong. Oh, here we go. He was aircraft commander and former assistant district flight safety officer with the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary. So this guy's very well connected in. And then you add his wife to that with her defense background and their medical sleep consulting, aerospace company. And then you look at the connections with Clintons and which, and the ties to the Community Foundation of the Virgin Islands, which basically grants out funds to numerous NGOs. And they've worked with the Clinton Global Initiative, and then of course we have the American Yacht Harbor, like I said, that he owns 50% of with Andrew Farkas. And so that's the main address that's going to an actual dock and slip. And no, I couldn't find anything on an actual boat owned by him. The other address that keeps coming up, I want to say it's like 6100 or 6500, and it's Suite 201. It keeps coming up, and I've seen other people say. So there's a little building next to the Marino that's like a mailbox place, a postal place, So it's like a P.O. box, only they're listing it as a suite. So there's numerous companies there, such as one of them's called the Naughty Nymph, Nauti, which is boat rentals. And I know they're so clever.
Yeah, right.
That one I haven't tied into any of these folks, but there's a lot of it's quite a nest. Now,
the property tax records, you've pointed this out. I had seen this as well. The property tax records for Zorro, right, was tied in. Was I think 20? It was initially put in Epstein's name. Then it was changed. Tell if I'm wrong, Corey, on 2013 to Cyprus. Cyprus is tied into one of those addresses, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Cyprus goes to this boat dock address.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Many of his companies go to this address, and the Antilles school. Okay, so where that address is called Red Hook. It's this area, and there's a bay there in the marina, which is at the far east end of St. Thomas, which is, a hop and a skip away boat ride from Great St. James and then off to Little St. James, which we know he bought Great St. James in 2016, Little St. James in 98. And that's the other thing, too, is the timeline of some of these people connected in, such as Jean Brennan. Oh, which, by the way, Jean is this is the CPA, that goes to that address. She also is the one who's on the documentation for his private comms that was set up. Mm-hmm. So she is originally from New Jersey. Her father was a medical doctor for children. And there was something called, I haven't had a chance to look into it, that in the school district, he was involved with some kind of child study programs or something. It just struck me as odd, but he was, so he was a medical doctor for children. He actually passed away a couple of years ago. I found his obituary. Her brother, George, is a mechanical engineer who works with ships and aviation, aircraft. He works with designing some sort of equipment that goes on to aircraft and that pertains to shipping. I know I'm not making any sense here because I don't have any notes in front of me on that. But it's for right now, the current company he's doing that for, because he's been an engineer for quite a while, is Navair, Navair. Mm-hmm. So, I find that interesting. And Jean's husband also owns a sea and ski boat rental and and her too, I imagine. But I believe he founded it, before they met. And that's in that marina as well in St. Thomas. And they also own a yacht sales company out of New Jersey. So these people are, you start thinking about how you run things and you move things and, and you've got all these players in covering this. There's through the medics to the waters, to the air, to, and then we have this Antilles school, which is sort of, it's at the south end, kind of more towards the middle of St. Thomas. And it sits on 27 acres. And they started back in the 50s, and it grew, and eventually it started on, I believe, 4 acres. And I got to tell you, I spent quite a bit of time on there. What I believe it is a grooming school for the elite. I believe they are training them there to, and sure, there may be some really rich parents that also get their kids in there. It's just so you know, toddler through high school. So it ranges from 10 grand to about 21 grand annually, depending on the age. You know, it gets more expensive the older you get. So we have, for example, let's see, Marjorie Rowles Roberts, the tax attorney who was involved in helping the Ponzi schemers with trying to get their tax breaks. And she's worked with Clinton Global Initiative, and she's on the board at the school. Her daughter is now at Johns Hopkins, and she's posting photos on her Facebook with politicians as well. So to me, it feels like a grooming school, that they're the way I see it is, because these kids, you know, I read energy really well. They don't feel abused to me, or I don't think that they're, you know, it's some pedo school or anything where people are going to jump to conclusions on that. I really think that they are teaching them an education that is probably more, you know, higher level, higher caliber than what the normal education system teaches, while they're grooming them at home too, and they're to bring them into eventual political positions or place them where they want to place them. And these kids probably, most of them aren't even aware of this until, you know, past college days, when they start working and realize, oh, so I'm in the thick of this. So this is what I'm supposed to do for a living, and this is where you want me. And now they're already connected in, because this is a very, very tight-knit group of political players involved in all of this. So my personal opinion is that it's like an elite grooming school, and we probably have several of these throughout the country, you know?
Mm-hmm.